Dear students, hope you are fine. Today we will take paper B of economics class 11th, which is based on Indian economic development. And in this paper, the first topic that we are going to learn is Indian economy on the eve of independence, or you can say Indian economy at the time of independence. What was the condition? What was the situation of Indian economy at the time of independence? This we will learn in this lecture. As you know that India got independence on 15th of August 1947. Before this date, India, or simply we can say Indian economy, was under Britishers. There was British rule in India. जिसको हम कॉलोनियल रूल भी कहते हैं. And they exploited the resources of India in their own way. Their main motive of utilizing the Indian resources was to serve their own interest. They largely exploited the Indian resources in order to benefit their own nation, their own country. Therefore, the resources were drained from India to their own country. No doubt, there were some developments that have also benefited the Indian masses, the Indians, such as in terms of railway sector, telegraph, etc. But largely, the benefits were reaped by the Britishers. This will be more clear to you by studying some basic features of Indian economy at the time of independence. उससे आपको एक क्लियर होगा जब हम बेसिक फीचर्स ऑफ इंडियन इकोनॉमी पढ़ेंगे जो मौजूद थे एट द टाइम ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस. First feature that we will study is share in GDP. Since there are three sectors of economy, हर एक इकोनॉमी की three sectors होते हैं. Number one, प्राइमरी सेक्टर, जिसको हम एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर भी कहते हैं. इट इंक्लूड्स एग्रीकल्चर and allied activities, those activities which are related to agriculture, which are dependent on agriculture activities, such as fishing, mining, poultry, etc. इसका जो शेयर था जीडीपी में एट द टाइम ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस, इट वाज इक्वल टू 58.7%. More than 50% of GDP came from primary sector, from agriculture sector. Similarly, The share of secondary sector in GDP was 14.3%. इसको हम इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर भी कहते हैं. इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर. और इसका जो जीडीपी में शेयर था, its share in GDP was 14.3%. Services sector or tertiary sector. Tertiary sector, जिसको हम सर्विसेज सेक्टर भी कहते हैं. And it includes banking, transport, education, healthcare, hotels and restaurants, trade and commerce, etc. And its share in GDP at the time of independence, it was 27%. Now from this data we can analyze, we can interpret that primary sector contributed highest share in GDP, which was 58.7%, followed by tertiary sector, services sector. Therefore, Indian economy at the time of independence was agrarian economy, as much share came from this sector. In 1950, value of GDP, gross domestic product, it was equal to $30.6 billion. Now, one more feature of Indian economy at the time of independence, that is in terms of share in employment. What was employment status at the time of independence? प्राइमरी सेक्टर का जो कंट्रीब्यूशन था एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन में, एम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रोवाइड करने में, it was equal to 72.7%. The man population, the large section of population were engaged in primary sector. It provided employment to 72.7% of population. And secondary sector, the industrial sector, it provided employment to 10.1% of population. And tertiary sector, that is known as services sector, and its share in employment, इसका जो share था employment में at the time of independence, it was 17.2%. And agriculture at the time of independence was main source of livelihood. Its share in employment was 72.7%. Third feature of Indian economy at the time of independence was low agricultural productivity. I have a data on two main crops such as wheat and rice. At the time of independence, productivity of wheat, that is in terms of kg per hectare, kilogram per hectare, it was equal to 660 kg per hectare, and now it is about 3000 kgs per hectare. At the time of independence, it was only about 660 kgs per hectare. Similarly, productivity of rice, that's in terms of kg per hectare, it was 665 kgs per hectare, and now it is more than 2000 kgs per hectare. And at the time of independence, it was only 665 kgs per hectare. Why it was so? This we have to learn in next unit. In coming lectures, we will learn the causes of low agriculture productivity in India. Here you have to remember, you have to memorize this data. Fourth feature, that is commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture, that is production of crops that are sold in the market in order to earn income, जिसको हम कैश क्रॉप्स भी कहते हैं. And at the time of independence, there was limited commercialization of agriculture. Agriculture was at subsistence level. There were no extra produce of agriculture that were sold in the market. There were no cash crops. A few cash crops were produced at the time of independence, such as jute and cotton, but their benefits were mainly exploited by Britishers. They were cultivated, they were sown and cultivated by Indians, but their benefits mainly went to Britishers. Means there were limited commercialization of agriculture at the time of independence. industries and handicrafts. Since at the time of independence, Indian economy was mainly agrarian economy. Large chunk of population were engaged in agricultural activities in agriculture sector, and there were limited industries. Few industrial units were established at the time of independence, such as Tata Iron and Steel Company (TISCO), Tata Iron, Tata Iron and Steel Company, and it was established in 1905. In the 19th century. And the other industries that developed during this time were sugar, cement, paper. Simply, there were not much industrial development in India at the time of independence. The industrial development was only in terms of exporting raw material. There was export of raw material by Britishers, and that raw material was converted into finished goods, which were then sold to the Indians at very high price. Means the economic benefits were reaped. The economic benefits went to the Britishers at the cost of Indians. Similar Indian handicrafts were famous. They were famous at that time. They received international recognition, such as Indian handicrafts, calicos of Bengal. These are some examples of Indian handicrafts that were internationally recognized. They were famous throughout the world. Calicos of Bengal. Calicos of Bengal. These were cotton fabrics. Similarly, saris of Banaras. इसी तरह जो इजिप्टियन मुमीज थी, इजिप्टियन mummies, they were wrapped in Indian Muslim. And it is talk of 2000 BC. During that time, Egyptian mummies were wrapped in Indian Muslim. Egyptian mummies includes the dead body of animals, birds, which were preserved in museums, and their body were wrapped in Indian Muslim. But at the time of independence, during Britishers, it is very also declined because the objective of Britishers, the goal of Britishers was to export raw material of India and import the finished goods from the British. That gave tough competition to these Indian handicrafts. Poor infrastructure. During British period, there were some developments in infrastructure like railways, telegraphs, but their main purpose, their main interest was to serve Britishers, to benefit the Britishers. In 1948, a railway line was only about 5,359 kilometers, and Langata Pakka Road, which is now known as Magnemized roads or all weather roads, and it was about 1,55,000 kilometers. This was infrastructural development at the time of independence. The country was freed from Britishers. Education. The education sector during Britishers or at the time of independence was in this condition that there were some colleges and universities established by Britishers, such as Thompson College, University of रूकरी, जिसको हम आज आईआईटी रूकरी से जानते हैं, but this education sector, it mainly benefited the elite class at that time. Only elite class benefited from these colleges and universities established by Britishers. In 1948, literacy rate in India was merely 18%. Only 18% of the population were literate who benefited from the educational development. Similarly, the other demographic features of India at the time of independence were infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate, it shows the number of deaths at the age of 5 years per thousand live births. And it was very high, 218 per thousand live births. Out of 1000 children, 218 died at the age of 5 years. This was due to poor healthcare sector, and life expectancy which is defined as the maximum number of years a newborn can expect to live throughout the life. Simply, it shows the maximum number of years a newborn can expect to live. And it was only 32 years. And now it is about 68 years. And at the time of independence, it was only 32 years. This was also due to poor healthcare infrastructure. One more important feature of Indian economy at that time of independence was poverty. Incidence of poverty was about 80%, and now it is only 21.9%. And at the time of independence, it was 80%. Severe poverty was in India at the time of independence. You can imagine how much poverty was in India at the time of independence. Now it is only 21.9%. At that time it was 80%. There were poor masses in India at the time of independence because many economic developments that took place in India during Britishers or other rulers, their main objective was to serve their own interest to benefit their own nation. And Indian masses were denied to reap, to get the fruits of these developments. Therefore, they remained extremely poor. And at the time of independence, on the eve of independence, जो foreign trade था, that was mainly dealing with export of raw material. The precious raw material of India were exported by these Britishers, and on the other hand, they imported the cheap finished goods, and their benefits went to the Britishers. And there were limited trade with other countries. And the export of raw material was mainly in terms of silk, cotton, indigo, and jute. And few countries were allowed to trade with India, such as China, Sri Lanka, and Iran. This was all about the condition, the features of Indian economy on the eve of independence, or on the at the time of independence. That is when country was freed by Britishers, the foreign invaders. Thanks.